painful emotions are those uncomfortable feelings that people have, those troubling feelings that a person has. And we oftentimes, after a period of time, we ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? How can I feel normal again? What's causing these uncomfortable and troubling feelings that I'm having? Are they caused by a disease? Are they caused by a disorder? Are these uncomfortable feelings a result of a chemical imbalance and that sort of thing? And while a person may hesitate to want to take a drug, they decide, if it'll make me feel better, I'm going to call the doctor and get some kind of prescription to help me feel better and get through this whole thing. And so they want to make the pain go away. And there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. And so, but we want to understand the emotions. We just don't want to medicate the emotion. What does the Bible say about emotions, painful emotions and good emotions and bad emotions? What's the origin of the painful emotions that we have? And how does your response to those emotions make it better or make it worse? How does this all work? Now, we all know what a worldview is. A worldview is like colored lenses in your glasses. If you have yellow lenses in your glasses, then everything you see is going to be yellowish. If you have red lenses in your glasses, everything that you see is going to be yellow, kind of reddish tint to it. The secular and materialistic worldview says that man is a material being, and his emotions and his mental processes are all material. Now, the Christian worldview, we interpret life through a biblical lens. When we look out, everything we see is tinted with this biblical, with a biblical lens. In other words, we look at the stars in the sky, we look at the beautiful day, and we say how God created the heavens and the earth, and He created the beautiful trees and the stars and the clouds and the mountains and everything, and He created man in His image, and we because we're looking through a biblical worldview, we see man has a dual nature. Man is not just a material being, but man is an immaterial being. And that immaterial and material interact with one another. And so the secular worldview is built upon the evolutionary materialistic view, where there's no God, man is just a material being only, and all your emotions, whatever the emotions may be, whatever your thoughts, whatever the choices are that you make, are chemical reactions in your brain that have just evolved over millions and millions of years. And since it's the material, then all the solutions are material solutions. Your emotion of love that you have for your husband or wife, the emotion of love that you have for your parents or your son or your daughter, it's all reduced to chemicals. And when the chemicals of the brain are out of whack, are out of balance, they say, it'll have a negative effect on your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors, and the choices that you make in life. It all affect those things. Now, the other thing about worldview is that everybody's worldview is based on faith, all right? If a person's faith is in a secular and materialistic worldview, when they look at a butterfly that's landed on a flower or whatever, when they look at a butterfly, they'll interpret that butterfly through their materialistic worldview, and they will marvel how that butterfly evolved over millions of years to such a beautiful insect. Now, those of us with a biblical world, a Christian worldview, a faith in God, we marvel at that butterfly. We marvel how God created such a beautiful and delicate insect. And so since everyone's worldview is faith, is a faith, in other words, faith in a creator or faith in naturalism, evolution, materialism, so on, neither of those worldviews can be demonstrated, can be proved scientifically. You can't study God in a laboratory, and you can't study what you believed happened millions and billions of years ago. And so everybody begins life with an assumption that their faith, that their worldview is true. Everybody begins with an assumption that their faith or their worldview is true. And that faith, that worldview, will determine what they believe about that butterfly and everything else. What they believe about emotions, what they believe about thoughts, what they believe about choices, what they believe about behavior. You see, when you begin with a false assumption, I tell my classes, when you begin with a false assumption, then everything else after that's going to be wrong. I'll say something like, if I told you after I get done here, I'm going to get in my car, get on Interstate 70 East and head for Kansas City. Well, you know that Kansas City is not east of St. Louis. Kansas City is west on 70. So if I'm convinced and I know that I can get on 70 East and go to Kansas City, everything I do after that assumption is going to be wrong. Now, many believers are convinced that the Christian worldview is sufficient. And they'll tell you, yes, the Bible is sufficient. The Christian worldview is sufficient. And they'll say, or they'll act this way. They may not verbally say it, but they'll act this way. They'll say, yes, the Christian worldview, the Bible is sufficient at explaining some things, but insufficient at explaining other things. And so what they do is to explain some things, they'll switch from the Christian worldview to the secular, materialistic, evolutionary worldview. And I did a couple of videos, I think it was last year, on addiction. And I have a Rumble channel, and I produce a new video. They're usually about 8 to 10 minutes every week. And I did part 1 and 2, I think last year, on addiction. And many Christians presume that the Bible is inadequate when it comes to understanding addiction. And Mark has talked about that in his books and so on and so forth. And what they do is since they believe the Bible is insufficient at speaking about addiction, they switch over to the secular, evolutionary, materialistic worldview to understand addiction. They switch over, and then in the same, they switch over to the secular view when they want to understand emotions, when they want to understand behaviors and thoughts. But then when they talk about salvation, when they talk about sin and family and these things, they switch back over to the Christian worldview. And so Christians have they've become habituated to switching back and forth between a Christian worldview and a secular worldview to explain things. And so they're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, the biblical worldview says that man, his emotions, his mental processes are immaterial. Let me say it again. The biblical worldview says that man's emotions and his mental processes are immaterial. Now, the Bible uses a variety of words to describe the immaterial part of man. The Bible will say inner man, okay? Heart, spirit, soul, mind, and a few others. But all those are synonymous terms. They all refer to the immaterial part of man. For example, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, it describes the creation of man, and it says man was created out of the dust of the ground. There's that material element, that material part, and God breathed in him, and he became a living soul. The breath of life, and he became a living soul. There's the immaterial part of man. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16, Paul speaks about the outer man and the inner man. Jesus said over in Matthew 15, he says, these people honor me with their lips. There's the outer man, but their heart is far from me. There is the inner man. Mental processes, thinking, do not originate in the brain, the body. Remember, the brain's part of the body. Mental processes do not originate in the brain, the body, but they originate in the immaterial heart, the inner man, the mind of man, okay? Matthew 9:4. It says, and Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, why are you thinking evil? Jesus knew what they were thinking. And then Jesus goes on and he says this, why are you thinking evil in your hearts? And so they're thinking, they're planning, they're plotting. Everything went on in their hearts, the immaterial part of man. Psalm 44, verse 21, for God knows the secret of your heart. Okay? I mean, think of something that only you know. Don't say it out loud, but think of something that you know. You're the only one that knows it. God says he knows that secret, okay? Where are those secrets? They're in your heart, okay? They're in your heart. Proverbs chapter 3 says, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. The decisions to keep or not, the choices made in the heart, not the body, the brain, okay? Jesus said in Matthew 22:37, he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. The emotion of love, where is it originated? In the heart, not the brain. You see, the materialists, the brain is the center of everything. In the Christian worldview, the heart is the center of everything. And so emotions in the heart, whether they're painful emotions or whether they're pleasant emotions, they can actually be, when these emotions are, what do I want to say? These emotions can be seen in the body. The emotions that originate in the heart can be seen in the body. Let me give you an example. Facial expression, okay? A smile, a frown. Where do those emotions begin? They begin in the immaterial part of man. They're expressed outwardly. The body is the vehicle of the heart. The heart expresses itself outwardly through the body. And so the emotion of happiness, there's the facial expression, a smile. The emotion of sadness, the facial expression of of sadness. Gesture. Okay, waving the hand, that kind of a thing, shrugging your shoulders. Those are all ways that the heart expresses itself through the body. Audible sounds, okay? Laughter, a sigh, weeping, spoken word or words. These are all ways that the heart expresses itself through the body. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25 says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down. Notice, where's the anxiety? It's in the heart. That's the origin of it. What does it do? It weighs a person down. You know how anxiety affects people or depression affects people. They say things like that is expressed in their body. They'll say things like it's expressed in the body through their words, their tongue, their voice box, or something. They'll say something like this. Oh, I'm so anxious and nervous, or I'm so depressed. I just can't get going. I can't get anything done. And their facial expression is seen when a person is anxious or depressed. Proverbs 15:3 says, "A joyful heart," where does that joy originate? In the heart. "Makes a cheerful face." It expresses itself in the body. The emotion of joy originates in the heart, expresses outwardly in the face and other bodily members. Jesus said in Matthew 15, you know this, "But the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart. For evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornication, thefts, false witness, and so on and so forth." Over in Matthew chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus described adultery, and he described it as beginning in the immaterial part of man, the heart. Proverbs 16:9 says, the mind of a person plans his ways. So when you're planning a birthday party or you're planning to rob the QT down the street, it all is done in your heart. It all is done in your heart. When you plan to come here, when you plan to go home, all the planning is done in your heart. And so, not your brain, okay? A person's facial expression, again, leads you to ask the question, are you mad? They say, no, I'm not mad. Why are you asking me if I'm mad? And you say, well, you look mad. You've done that, you know? What are you so happy about? I'm not happy. I'm tired. I want to go home. I've been here for 4, 5 days and late and stuff. I'm not happy. It's seen in my face. It's heard in my voice, and so on and so forth. Anger in the heart can affect the body in other ways. Well, it can affect your physical heart, that thing that beats in our chest. It can make it beat faster. The anxiety in the heart, the anger in the heart can make your heart, physical heart, beat faster. It can raise your blood pressure. You know, it can cause you to perspire. You know, it does a lot of things. You see, the secularist explanation is incorrect. It's an incorrect, because it has an incorrect view of human nature. When you eliminate and only say man is material only, and you eliminate the immaterial part of man, there's a lot about man you don't understand. It attempts to explain emotions, behaviors, and thoughts and choices without any reference to God, without any reference to that immaterial side of man. It reminds me of what Paul said in Romans 1. I can't remember what verse it was, where he says that man does not see fit to acknowledge God. You know, man is material only, and all his problems and all of his issues are material. And of course, like I said, when you begin with the wrong presupposition, everything after that's going to be wrong. The biblical worldview, the material and immaterial man, and they interact, as I said, they interact with one another, and we've seen that in what happens in the heart can be seen on the face and so on and so forth. But listen, all of this has tremendous implications when it comes to neuroimaging, brain scans, okay? Now, I'm not referring to the usefulness of brain scans, okay, or the effectiveness of brain scans. I remember my daughter's stepdaughter was kicked in the head by a horse at a camp down in southern Illinois, and they airlifted her to Children's Hospital in St. Louis, and we were all in there, and the doctor comes out and he shows us his scan. And we see this bleeding. He says, this is bleeding. We see this snapshot. That's what it is, a snapshot. And he tells us this is the bleeding going on. And so, I mean, they're very useful. They save lives and everything and help in diagnosing a lot of things, a lot of physical injuries and diseases, and like brain tumors and fractured skulls, and like I just said, bleeding, intracranial bleeding, and swelling, and so on and so forth. What I'm talking about right now are the limitations and misconceptions of brain scans when it comes to behavior, emotions, thoughts, and addiction, and on and on and on. You see, the secular worldview rejects the immaterial nature of man And they say that's all religion, that's not science, it's faith, and so on and so forth. There is no heart, there is no soul, there is no mind. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't believe man has a mind, okay? What they say is man does have a mind, and many of them do, many of them don't, okay? But they say man does have a mind, but the mind is located somewhere in the brain. That's what most of them say. It's located somewhere in the brain. The point is that nobody knows, because nobody has ever seen an image of the mind. Oh, there's images of your brain, but no one has ever seen an image of the mind. You remember in Hebrews chapter 11, over in verse 1, it says, faith is the conviction of things not seen. And of course, scientific method, we know, involves seeing and observing things and repeating things. You see, the materialistic worldview of the mind is not based on science. As I said at the beginning, it's based on faith. They base it on something they say is there, the mind, somewhere in the brain, but we can't see it. That's the very definition of faith. And so they, when they talk about, hey, we follow the science, and like they do so much today, and they're not following the science, they're following their faith. Everybody begins with the presupposition that their worldview is true, okay? And, but the biblical immaterial heart, like I said a while ago, is our starting point. The secular starting point is always the brain. So they're always concerned about the brain and medicating the brain. We are focused on the heart and how heart change is real change and change that pleases God. Secularists say, the secular says that basically by comparing images of the brain, here's an image, here's an image, here's an image. And remember, a scan is a single image. That's it. Just like if you take a picture, that's a picture. It doesn't that's it. And all you see there is what's in that picture. And here's what they say. They say that by comparing brain images, that helps them to understand behavior, motives, why this person acts like they do, and the choices they make, the addictions and the mental illnesses, as they compare these brain images, okay? You see, again, the secular worldview is not science, because, you see, it's faith in an underlying theory of evolutionary materialism. It's faith in a belief that man is material only. It's faith in a belief that neuroimaging can provide a picture of the brain and draw conclusions about the mind, which they can't see. What they do is they compare these images that they take. And they notice there's a change. Well, we see something in this image that we didn't see in an earlier image. And so they see a change. And they assume, because of their underlying faith, because of their underlying worldview, they assume that the changes are the cause of addiction or attention deficit disorder, or whatever mental illness they want to call it. They think, oh, that's the cause of the person's problems. You see, the fact is, the brain is always changing. Joy, sadness, fear, anger, an endless number of emotions that we have affect the brain and cause changes in the brain, including chemical changes. All right? You see, the immaterial acts upon the material, as we've been talking about. The immaterial acts upon the material. The heart influences the brain. The heart influences the body, the brain. The brain reacts to the heart and changes. The heart, anxiety. The body, the brain reacts. The facial expression changes. Okay? The heart, physical heart, beats faster. You see, neuroimaging can capture an image of changes that the heart has made on the brain. But they don't believe in an immaterial heart. So it's that change, it's that thing there that's the cause. You see, what they see on the image is not a cause. What they see on an image is an effect that the immaterial heart has on the material body, the brain. The scan, they can look at a scan and they can see something. They cannot tell you what caused it. We can, okay? The heart affects the body. Like I said, neuroimaging is a wonderful tool. I mean, it's a great thing that we have today. But the propaganda that teaches scans can detect causes of behavior, choices that people make. All that does is promote a deeper faith in evolutionary materialism.